Hey everybody, this is Perch. One of the things I'm realizing, I think I need to put a sarcasm warning in these videos. Most people get, I don't know the exact number because the people who comment is a tiny fraction of the people who are actually watching the videos. I'll get a video that has 6,000 views and I'll get 150 comments. And so the comments are not necessarily indicative of all the people watching. It's just a small sampling. But a number of people miss the sarcasm. Now, I know my sense of humor is dry as dirt in a lot of cases. And I blame watching a lot of British programming when I was younger. It's that. And then, later part of life, watching a bunch of Japanese programming, which I sure mixed the whole thing up into one absolutely lunatic stew. But I need to put a sarcasm where people are like, wait, are you serious? No, no, not at all. But anyway, that's just something that's clearly, I don't know, I have to wrestle with a little bit. Maybe you guys have some suggestions. You can let me know. Um, you know, Here's this interesting contradiction that I think happens within comics. And it's where, as the comic creators, as the people writing comics, making comics, I think they struggle with this too. It dawns on me, I haven't done a video on this, which is a little surprising because, it comes up fairly regularly when I'm in conversations with people, is a sense of not frustration, but at least like, I don't know what to do from writers who say that they get sent two, equal contradictory messages from the fans, from the customers. So I'm hoping all of you listening to this can help clear it up a little bit. So the basic premise goes like this. We don't want our characters to change because we like, certain aspects of a story or a timeline, or like our favorite memory of the X-Men was during that time when in X-Men 92, when there was a cartoon and Jim Lee was drawing it, and it was a golden age for the X-Men, and people like that age, that era. So don't change it. At the same time, people will say, hey, why isn't there any character development? Why can't these characters get married or have kids or grow and evolve and change? And we'd like to see forward progress. We'd like to see new things. But by the way, don't change anything. I'm paraphrasing now what gets said. And this is something that comics in general, and I think writers really struggle with, is how do you serve both needs? The needs for people to say, I really love this particular moment in time. I love this era. I want more of this. However, if you just give me that, then I'm going to say, you're not moving anything forward. We're not making any progress. You're not creating new opportunities for me to love. You're just kind of staying in the same place. It's nostalgia bait. It's whatever it happens to be. I think that the struggle is real in the sense of that does occur, but in many cases, I think a lot of current writers are overthinking it, meaning they're leaning too much into part of what is said and kind of missing truly what's said. This is actually one of those cases where the expression, give the customers what they need rather than what they want or what they're asking for, somewhat applies, because if you take that request very, very literally, meaning don't ever evolve and please evolve, yeah, you're stuck. Those two things, overlap. But what the customer is actually telling you is that they want, ideally, and by the way, in some cases, the customer is asking for things that are impossible. Like there's a lot of people who love that X-Men era that I mentioned, and the only thing that would really make it sing or really make it work for them is if Jim Lee came in and drew X-Men again. And that's definitely not going to happen, and it's outside of the control of the publisher. In this case, it's not even, I don't think, like they could wrestle up enough money to get Jim Lee in. It's not going to happen. But that in a lot of people's minds, that is kind of a core part of the whole picture, is having those artists, that talent back. It's like, I would really like to see Spider-Man again, and I'd really like Todd McFarlane to draw it. Well, the odds of that happening are zero. It's impossible. To me, I'd really like some Cosmic Comics, drawn by Jack Kirby coming out right now. Well, obviously that is also impossible. Unfortunately, he's passed on. So, there's certain elements of this that, we can wish for something, but it's impossible to deliver it. Now, in fairness, I think the vast majority, and here I'm saying like 99%, the overwhelming majority of fans. They do know this. And when they say something like, I'd really like more Jim Lee X-Men, they know they can't get it. They know that is, likely physically impossible. And so they're not going to get really hung up on it, but they may express that wish, that desire. And so in that case, what they're actually asking for, or what they really want, is the spirit, the feeling, the tone of that era of the X-Men. They want that more adventure first. They want that art style that is more bombastic, for lack of a better word, more dynamic. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for something that's going to reflect that era, not necessarily that era exactly. And this is where if you take people too literally, you find yourself in like, well, I can't deliver it, so I'm just going to do what I want to do. But no, that's what they're looking for. And I think that's generally true with all of this. When people say, we really want, things to remain as they are. We want comics like they were in the 90s. They're not saying that the characters can't get married, can't have children, can't evolve. They're saying what's they're saying is that they want that feeling of story. They want that time period. They want that pacing, that style of comics, that genre. I think that if you looked at the comics coming out in the mid 90s and you look at the comics coming out today, they may both be in the superhero genre, but they're both very different versions of that superhero genre. I think that, and by the way, this isn't a now versus then kind of argument. I think you could make the same statement based on, comics that are coming out in the 80s and, Alan Moore doing Watchmen. Alan Moore's Watchmen is a quote unquote superhero book in the sense that there are superheroes doing superhero things, but it's not. You can't say that title, Watchmen, is the same as what was going on in say Teen Titans at the time, or Uncanny X-Men, or the Avengers. They were very, very different books, both superhero, but there's a subclassification within superhero. And I think that in a lot of cases, when people say I'd like comics like X or Y, they're talking about a genre, they're talking about a style to those comics that fit that era. They're talking about superhero books, but not like superhero books that are done today, superhero books that are done yesterday. And I've done the video before, like why doesn't Marvel, or DC or some of the big publishers bite the bullet? Image is trying, by the way. Image is doing this, I think, better than most, in that they do have, a lot of comics that they're producing. I think 60, 70 comics they're producing a month. And they are trying to fit some things into more of an indie book, more of a romance book, more of a horror book. I think the flaw in Image is that whoever's doing their marketing, whoever's kind of in charge of that piece, I don't feel like they really understand the power of genres that they could actually bring to the table. So they don't market that way. It's still, Image comics are still like, here's a bunch of books, and they kind of dump them on the table, and you're kind of left to your own devices to figure out which is which. I think that's an area where they're, they could do a lot better, and they could make a lot more money by simply, classifying what they've got in a way that's, easier to consume and easier to understand. But regardless of all that, Marvel and DC, I think if it's too hard for them to really contemplate a horror book or a Western book, I know they've fooled around with horror, but it never feels like they're fully committed to it. At the very least, they should think about superhero. And superhero has different flavors of storytelling. There's superheroes more indie bent, there's superheroes more classic, superheroes, dark and gritty and deconstructionist. I mean, start putting things out that satisfy each of those genres within superheroes. You've got superheroes, so try classifying that way first, and avoid missing obvious opportunities. One of the weirder things, and granted, I'm talking about a comic book that hasn't come out yet, and maybe it'll all be fine, but they're doing X-Men 92. House of X or House of whatever. They're basically taking X-Men 92, X-Men that time period, and then they're mashing it up with Jonathan Hickman level plots and storytelling to do Krakoa era House of X, but set as if it came out many years ago with the X-Men 92 universe. And I think that's a very strange choice. I think it's I mean, but you could do anything you want, but it feels like there you're taking the time period, the visual look and feel of characters in one era, one time, and then you're mashing it up with a completely different genre. That is the genre you currently have today. The whole point of X-Men 92, by and large, was to give readers the feeling of something that was very different from the current comics that were coming out, that was going to tap into that same feeling and that same atmosphere. And even though you read the interviews and the writer's like, yeah, we're going to give it, or, we're going to give people everything they loved about the X-Men 92 verse, just, completely connecting with Moira and Krakoa and, House of X, Powers of 10, setting and everything. It's like, well, okay, so that's not what got people to the table for X-Men 92. That's the whole point. And I think that's where that's where it feels like there's somebody asleep at the wheel or steering this thing in the wrong direction to say, look, we're producing 80 to 90 comics a month. We could take a couple of those comics and we can make them feel very classic superhero book style. And we could take a couple more and we could go further back and do something from like the 60s and 70s and meet that need. And we can take a couple more and we can do comics that feel like superhero books that feel like today. And we can take a couple more and do classic 2000s, dark and gritty. You can do all of these superhero genres within the line you already have because you're pumping out so many books. I mean, hell, with all the Batman titles that are coming out right now, shouldn't you be able to have a kind of classic style Batman from the 70s and then a Batman from the 80s, 90s and a Batman from, 2000s and the current, couldn't you have those different, classifications, those different genres in the mix? I think that would probably do pretty well and be a decent answer. But it's weird, even when they tap into to certain, even when they tap into old genres, they then seem to want to say, well, our first goal is to make it seem and write and sound like today. It's like, no, that's when, again, going back to the original statement, when readers and fans say things that sound contradictory, things that sound like you can't possibly delay, like we want this feeling, but we want change. They want that feeling. They want that atmosphere. They want that time period. That's what they're looking for. They certainly want characters to evolve and shift and move around. They're looking for a type of storytelling. And I think therein lies a key answer to how do you satisfy all this different kind of variety of fan desire with the output that you're currently putting out. I don't think it's that hard, but it seems to come across that way. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, like and subscribe. You got one? Yeah, that's always good. And thanks for listening.